The promise of forever that ended too soon. Menglong and the love he couldn't keep. There are promises whispered under moonlight that never reach the morning. For Menglong, love was supposed to be his forever, a melody he thought would never end. Yet, when the world woke up to the news of his death, the silence that followed spoke louder than any song he ever sang. Behind the cameras, the charm and the soft-spoken words that made millions fall in love with him, lived a man who was holding on to something that had already slipped away, a love he could not keep, and a promise that destiny never let him fulfill. Those close to you said he often spoke of love not as something fleeting, but eternal. He believed love was a language that outlived fame, time, and even pain. And for a while it seemed he had found a kind of love, the kind that inspires songs, soft smiles, and sleepless nights. But the truth is, forever doesn't always last as long as we hope. In the early days of his relationship, Menglong was radiant. His friends would recall how his laughter filled the studio, how his eyes sparkled even when he was exhausted after long shoots. He would talk about her, the woman who was his muse, his calm, his reason. He described her as the quiet to his chaos, someone who saw him not as the celebrity Menglong, but as the boy who still wrote songs at 2 a.m. barefoot, staring at the city lights from his window. They met in the most unexpected way, not through fame or fortune, but through timing. She was working behind the scenes on a project he was part of, a woman who had no interest in his stardom. And that was what drew him in. With her, he could be human. With her, he could breathe. They would spend hours talking about dreams and fears, the kind of conversations that make time feel like it's standing still. For years, she became his anchor. When fame got loud, she was his silence. When he doubted himself, she was the voice reminding him that he was enough. Together, they built a world of small promises, morning coffees, shared playlists, secret messages written on napkins during filming breaks. And one night, under a drizzle that blurred the city lights, he promised her forever. But forever has its enemies, distance, pressure, and the cruel weight of expectations. As Yu's fame grew, so did the walls around him. The schedule became tighter, the spotlight brighter, and the world louder. And in that chaos, love started to fade into something fragile. She began to drift, not because she stopped loving him, but because she could no longer reach the man he was becoming. He was always there, yet never really present. The same man who once listened to her heartbeat like a song was now lost in endless rehearsals, late-night recordings, and interviews where he smiled on cue. Their messages became shorter, their calls less frequent. And though neither wanted to say it, the silence between them was already speaking. He tried to hold on. In his notebooks, they later found scribbles of unfinished lyrics, songs that spoke of promises breaking, of holding someone's memory long after they've gone. Forever, one of them read, is just another word for goodbye we don't want to say. The breakup wasn't loud. It wasn't scandalous. It was quiet, almost respectful. Two hearts breaking in private, away from the cameras. She left, taking nothing but the memories, and he stayed, holding everything she left behind. Those who saw him afterward said he wasn't the same. The light in his eyes had dimmed. He became quieter, more withdrawn, more careful with his words. In interviews, when asked about love, he would smile faintly and say, "Love doesn't end, it just changes where it lives." Fans thought it was poetic, but those close to him knew it was pain wearing a mask of wisdom. The months that followed were heavy. His songs grew deeper, sadder. His last few works were filled with undertones of longing, the kind of heartbreak that doesn't shout but whispers. It was in his voice, his lyrics, his silence. In one of his last studio sessions, he recorded a song that no one knew about, a track he never intended to release. The team called it Forever Sedge. The lyrics were hauntingly prophetic. If love is a promise, then I broke mine when I stopped believing in tomorrow. That day in the studio, the air felt different. His producer recalled that you seemed distant but calm. He spoke little, his gaze lost between the dim lights and the soundboard. When the music started, his voice carried something raw, something final. It wasn't just a performance, it was a confession. The people there didn't realize they were witnessing his goodbye, not to music, but to the world that had stopped listening to his pain. After the recording ended, he stayed behind, staring at the empty microphone as if expecting it to answer him back. The team left, thinking he needed a moment alone. It was the last time anyone saw him alive. When news of his death broke, the world froze. The man who had given so many hope had quietly lost his own. There were no notes, no explanations, just an unfinished melody, a message that silence was now his only song. But days later, while sorting through his things, they found a letter tucked between his notebooks. It wasn't long, but every word carried weight. He wrote not of fame, nor regret, but of love. He mentioned her, the woman who once made him believe in forever. "I promised you forever," the letter read, "but I didn't know forever could hurt this much. I kept your laughter in every song, your memory in every note. I hope one day, when the wind passes by, it carries my voice to you, not as goodbye, but as thank you." Those who read it couldn't hold back their tears. It was the closure the world never asked for, but desperately needed. In the days that followed, fans turned his songs into memorials. People played his tracks at midnight, leaving candles and flowers at his favorite studio. The phrase "forever ended too soon" began trending, a tribute to the man whose love story became his final song. She came to his memorial, quietly hidden from the cameras, dressed in black. She stood at the back, holding a single white lily. When one of his songs played, the one they had written together, she whispered, "You kept your promise after all." And in that moment, it was as if his silence answered her. Even in death, Yu Menglong's presence lingered in every melody, every lyric, every unsent message that lived in his music. He may have left, but his love, fragile, pure, unfinished, stayed behind. It lived in the pauses between notes, in the breaths between verses. It lived in the silence he left the world to interpret. His story wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about the kind of love that burns quietly, endlessly even after goodbye. It was about promises that death cannot break, and about the tragedy of loving too deeply in a world that never stops to listen. Yu Menglong's forever ended too soon. But maybe that's what makes his story eternal. Because sometimes love doesn't need to last forever to be infinite. It just needs to be real, and his was. And somewhere in the quiet of that final night, when the lights went out and the world went still, his heart played its last melody, one that said without words, "I kept my promise, even when it broke me." That was Yu Menglong's truth. His silence was not emptiness. It was love, eternal, unspoken, and tragically beautiful. The night before Yu Menglong's passing, the city was drenched in rain, the kind of soft, rhythmic downpour that seems to echo the ache in a lonely heart. The studio lights glowed faintly through the mist, reflecting against the puddles on the empty streets. Inside, Yu sat by the piano, fingers tracing the same chords over and over, as if trying to find the sound of something he had already lost. The promise of forever he once whispered beneath that same kind of rain now felt like an echo fading into nothing. He had always been quiet when he worked, but that night was different. There was no excitement, no playful humming between takes. Just silence, heavy, consuming, and strangely peaceful. The producer who saw him said he looked like a man who had already said everything he needed to say. He played a few final notes, closed his eyes, and exhaled slowly. It was almost as if the music had become too heavy for him to carry. That silence wasn't new. It had been following him for months, creeping into his mornings, lingering in his messages, wrapping around every song he tried to write. After she left, the woman who once colored his world with laughter and warmth, you became a ghost of his former self. He didn't stop working, didn't stop smiling for the cameras, but his friends could see it. That quiet kind of heartbreak that doesn't explode, it just erodes. In one interview, just weeks before his death, a reporter asked what love meant to him. He paused for a long moment before answering. Love is when someone's absence still fills the room. No one thought much of it at the time, but looking back, it sounded less like a poetic line and more like a confession. They say his apartment remained exactly as it was the day she left. Her favorite mug was still on the kitchen counter. Her hairpin still rested on the nightstand. He couldn't bring himself to move them. Each item was a memory, each corner of his home a reminder of a life that had felt real once. At night, he'd sit by the window, the same one they used to sit by together, watching the rain blur the city lights. Sometimes he'd hum unfinished melodies, songs that never made it to the studio. Among the many drafts found after his death was one titled The Promise We Forgot. The lyrics were raw and almost painful to read. One line stood out. I kept you in my music because I couldn't keep you in my arms. That one sentence carried the weight of everything he couldn't say out loud. He had turned his heartbreak into melody, his longing into verse. Each song became a love letter sealed inside the music he left behind. Friends said he tried to reach out to her again once, months after the breakup. He called late one night, but she didn't answer. It was her birthday, and maybe all he wanted was to hear her voice one more time. He left a voicemail, one that would later be replayed in whispers by those close to her. It was short, trembling, and almost childlike in tone. Hey, it's me. I just wanted to say, happy birthday. I hope you're okay. You still have the song I wrote for you, right? Don't let it get dusty. It was the last time he ever tried to call. As his fame grew, so did his loneliness. The world loved his voice, but no one noticed how it trembled differently after she left. His smile became a mask, one he wore with grace but without meaning. He appeared on shows, laughed at questions, but his eyes often drifted away, as if searching for something only he could see. His co-star once mentioned, he looked like he was here, but part of him was always somewhere else, with someone else. On the night he recorded Forever's Edge, his final unreleased track, the team remembered how he stared at the empty chair beside the piano before singing. It was the same chair she used to sit in during rehearsals. She used to listen quietly, head tilted, eyes soft, as if the world paused for his voice alone. That night, the chair was still there, untouched, waiting. He began to sing, and though his voice didn't break, everyone in the room could feel that something inside him already had. When the recording ended, he didn't say goodbye. He simply stood up, smiled faintly, and whispered, "It's done." No one knew he meant everything was done. The song, the pain, the waiting. Later, they would find his phone on the piano bench. The screen showed a message he had typed but never sent. It read, "I finally finished our song. I think you'd like it. Maybe this is how I'll keep my promise by letting you go." That single unsent message became the heart of his tragedy, a reminder that sometimes the most painful goodbyes are the ones we never get to deliver. At his funeral, her presence was quiet, almost invisible. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't cry publicly. But when the piano version of his song played, she closed her eyes, and tears fell silently down her face. After everyone left, she stayed behind. In the dim light of the nearly empty hall, she whispered, "You always said forever. I just didn't know forever would end this soon." There's a haunting beauty in the way love lingers after death. Yu Menglong's story is not just about heartbreak. It's about the kind of devotion that doesn't die, even when the person does. His silence wasn't weakness. It was the sound of a man who loved too deeply and lost too quietly. The studio where he spent his last night has since become a quiet monument. Fans leave flowers, handwritten notes, and paper hearts with lyrics from his songs. One message, written by a fan, reads, "You promised forever and you kept it, because we'll never forget." His music continues to echo through headphones, radios, and hearts, the kind of immortality he never asked for but somehow earned. Every chord he played, every lyric he wrote, was a reflection of that one broken promise that turned into his final masterpiece. If love was his muse, heartbreak was his legacy. And though his story ended too soon, the love he couldn't keep became the song the world will never stop playing. Because in the end, Menglong didn't die with silence. He left a melody that still hums in the background of every broken heart, a reminder that even promises that end too soon can still echo forever. And somewhere, maybe beyond the noise of fame and sorrow, he and the woman he once loved will meet again. Not in this life, but in the melody that never stops playing, in the forever that finally keeps its promise.